We are honored to be here today with Dr. Scott Stoll. Now, Dr. Stoll is the co-founder of the Plantrition Project, the International Plant-Based Nutrition and Healthcare Conference, and the International Journal of Disease Reversal and Prevention, which is a brand new scientific journal called the IJDRP, as well as the Regenerative Health Institute, which is a unique collaborative project with the Rodale Institute. Dr. Scott Stoll wears many hats, and he's also the chairman of the board for the Plantrition Project and the chief medical director for the Ruby Cooking School. Now, every year, Dr. Stoll has hosts a very popular one-week health immersion, which is called Dr. Stoll's Total Health Immersion in Naples, Florida. In addition to authoring several books and hosting his own daily TV and radio programs, Dr. Stoll has appeared on numerous national shows, including the Dr. Oz show, and he's been featured in Eating You Alive, as well as the newest documentary, The Game Changers. And we'll be talking about The Game Changers in a little bit today. He's also a published author, and he's also a member of the 1994 Olympic bobsled team. He's a highly sought after international speaker, and he lives with his wife and 6 children in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Dr. Stoll, it is an absolute pleasure to be here today with you again. We've hosted you multiple times on the Mastering Diabetes Online Summit, and we always love having you. So thanks for being here with us today.
Cyrus, Robbie, it is so great to be with you and with your amazing audience. You guys are doing such incredible work, and it's really my honor to support everything that you're doing. I believe you guys have really dialed in on how to help people transform their lives and how to help people overcome diabetes. And so it's sincerely an honor to be with you today. Thank you.
Awesome. We appreciate you saying that. You know, we got a lot of stuff today. Today, we want to basically cover 2 main topics. The first one is going to be exercise and the value of exercise for people living with diabetes or people who are trying to prevent the development of diabetes and other chronic diseases, as well as sleep. So we're going to talk about both of those 2 today. So let's start at the top here. Now, most people, I would say, they're aware that exercise is quote unquote good for them. But many people don't necessarily know why that's the case, what's sort of the biology of exercise. So can you give our audience a little bit of understanding here as to why does exercise help with chronic disease prevention and reversal?
Yeah, sure. Well, that's a big question.
It's a big question.
Yeah. You know, let's try and consolidate that down, and then you can add anything that I happen to miss in the short answer. One thing I think that's really important when we talk about exercise, I find there's a lot of mindsets around exercise where people have, you know, kind of an aversive thought about what exercise is. And some of it, I think, is because, you know, the images of exercise that are put forward into our culture are things that not everybody enjoys. Not everybody enjoys weightlifting. Not everybody enjoys long distance running or marathoning. Not everybody enjoys cycling. And so a lot of people have, you know, this thought that exercise is not for me, or if that's what exercise is, I don't want to do that. So I just want to dispel all of that right now with, and help change mindsets that exercise is activity, it's movement. And it's really just finding something that you love to do, something that causes you to break a sweat, and then just do it. You know, find a window of time and figure out how to do those things you love to do. And it can be everything from, you know, chasing a soccer ball around with your children. We play Tickle Monster in our house where I run up and down the stairs for 30 minutes and break a sweat. I mean, it's anything that you can do to just move your body and have fun doing so. So I want to, you know, make sure that we address that right off the bat so that, you know, we're not talking about exercise and people have this belief that it's something that's really uncomfortable, painful, and arduous. It can actually be really fun and good for you.
You know, I'm actually really glad that you made that distinction because you're right. You know, exercise is not the perception of exercise can be intimidating and overwhelming. And we like to use the term frequent movement or just movement in general. So however you want to phrase it is totally fine. But the idea here is that, you know, it doesn't have to be intimidating. And in fact, it's not, especially if you structure it in your lifestyle properly.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So exercise is good for us for so many reasons. If we just start with diabetes, because we're mastering diabetes, we don't want to miss this key part, but all the way down to the cellular level, there's a channel called the GLUT4 channel. And so this is a really important channel because it's an entryway for glucose into the cell. And one of the benefits of this GLUT4 channel is that it doesn't require insulin to turn the lock to open the door. Exercise actually opens the door and glucose comes into the cell without the need for insulin. And so GLUT4 is really one of the strong benefits for exercise in somebody with type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, type 1.5, or people that are trying to prevent disease and have metabolic syndrome. When you exercise, your body naturally lowers the glucose levels because it flows into the cell without the need for insulin, and your body's able to use less insulin over time. Now, another thing that exercise does is it actually upregulates the genes that add more GLUT4 receptors. So as we exercise over time, not only are we utilizing the GLUT4 receptors that we have, but our body is starting to produce more GLUT4 receptors. And so it adds benefit over time. And so in that way, your insulin requirements come down through just the regular addition of exercise. Exercise does a lot of other wonderful things for the body. It stimulates the release of epinephrine in the brain and the adrenaline. And so mood is transitioned dramatically during exercise. And this is really important for people struggling with disease or trying to prevent disease, because around this whole food and hunger signal component of our lives, our mood plays significantly into food choices. And so, the research has shown that when people are exercising and their mood is better, they make better choices with their food after they've been exercising rather than with physical inactivity. And so that's really important. I think it's often missed when we talk about exercise, because we talk about the other benefits of calorie burn and the other physiologic benefits, but that mood component is really important, especially in our culture of bad choices around food.
What about people living with metabolic conditions like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and obesity? Can exercise help improve these conditions after years of inactivity?
Yeah, absolutely. What we see that a number of things that happen with exercise. So down at the level of the artery, exercise helps to heal the endothelium, or it benefits the endothelium, which is the lining of cells on the inside of our arteries. And so those little cells are critical because they produce chemicals like nitric oxide that cause the blood vessels to expand and open up, and it reduces blood pressure. It also decreases other hormones like cortisol when we exercise, and cortisol will cause vasoconstriction. Cortisol is also related to stress. So when we're exercising, stress levels go down, cortisol goes down, we get more vasodilation of our blood vessels, not only to our heart, but also our brain. Exercise reduces inflammatory levels in the body, which is really important. Inflammation has been linked to so many metabolic diseases, including cancer, heart disease, hypertension, and even diabetes. And so when we're exercising, the inflammatory levels and inflammatory biomarkers actually reduce over time with exercise. And it also impacts the microbiome. There's an improvement in health of the microbiome with exercise. And as we'll talk about a little later, that microbiome is so important for so many things, including blood sugar management, blood pressure, hunger signals, and even mood and emotion in our brain. So a multitude of effects. It's strengthening our muscles, which is really important, which is fall prevention as we get older. It's caloric burn, not only during the exercise, but afterwards with the elevated metabolic rate that follows exercise. And so there's an improvement in angiogenesis and normalization of the blood vessel growth to injured or damaged tissues, and a cutting off of blood supply to tissues that don't need excess blood supply, like fat cells and cancer cells. So it enhances the body's ability to lose weight over time.
Dr. Stoll, you're really selling me on this. I'm gonna go outside and play some basketball. Gotta get on a treadmill like Dr. Greger all day.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Stoll, you also said that exercise can specifically improve the health of your microbiome. And I know the microbiome is this sort of giant topic that's become very popular these days because there's millions of people around the planet that are living with dysregulated gut health. So could you go into a little bit of detail here about how exercise particularly affects microbiome health?
Yeah, and some of this is still being worked out. In a number of ways, exercise benefits the microbiome. One of the ways is it reduces cortisol. Cortisol normally starts ramping up in the morning as we wake up, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and it's a normal stress hormone, and it ebbs and flows during the course of the day with stress. But when we have persistently elevated levels of cortisol, because we're not managing our stress, it starts to damage the microbiome. When we exercise, cortisol naturally comes down and prevents any further damage to the microbiome. They've also shown that with exercise, it enhances the tight junctions in the gut, preventing things like gut inflammation, leaky gut syndrome. And it also helps to facilitate the health of those bacteria that are producing things like short-chain fatty acids, the healthier bacteria. And these short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, we'll talk about more in a moment because they have some real significant effects on blood sugar management in the body, as well as down-regulating inflammation in the body. But for a number of ways, it's reducing inflammatory levels, it's enhancing the maintenance of the beneficial bacteria in the gut.
So for a person living with any form of diabetes, how much exercise do you recommend? And would it be different for somebody living with type 1 or type 2 diabetes?
Like the simplest recommendation for people is just find something you love to do that causes you to sweat and do it 30 minutes a day. If you enjoy it, you can increase that and work up towards an hour, which is better. But starting at 30 minutes is a reasonable goal, and I think most of us can find 30 minutes. What I even recommend for people that are just starting out, I will tell people, if you're just starting to exercise, find 5 minutes, find 10 minutes, and just do something you enjoy for 5 or 10 minutes, and that little step of success will allow you to kind of make a penultimate step into the next level of success. So starting somewhere where you're going to be successful and then working up eventually towards an hour a day is optimal.
I love that. It's actually not a hard recommendation because I think one thing that many people who don't exercise regularly may not know is that as soon as you start exercising, it kind of feels uncomfortable to begin with. Sweating can be unnatural, breathing heavy can be unnatural, being out of breath can be uncomfortable. But then over the course of time, after a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it starts to feel more natural and it becomes less difficult.
That's
and
right.
So, it gets to a point where you actually can start to look forward to exercise as opposed to being, this thing that I do that actually makes me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's right. In our brains, if we look at something and we think that it's going to be too difficult, it's very hard for us to make that as a lifestyle change. If our brains actually like to look at things and say, well, that's really easy, I can do that. And so if we give ourselves a first step that appears almost too easy to do, we're much more likely to do it. We'll see the success and celebrate the success, and then we are building that kind of momentum into change. And so, with recommendations, it's easy to say everybody should be exercising an hour a day, but for most people, it seems impossible to do that. But everybody can find 5 or 10 minutes to do something and then build from there.
Couldn't agree with you more. Now, one thing, there's a new movie called The Game Changers, which is really making waves and trying to educate people about the evidence-based truth about the actual detriment that meat and dairy products have on athletic performance. And most importantly, the evidence-based truth about the benefit that a plant-based diet can have on optimal athletic performance and recovery. Now, many people believe that athletes can't eat a plant-based diet because if they do, they're going to become protein deprived. So can you go into a little bit of detail here about this myth that you can't eat enough protein on a plant-based diet, especially if you're an athlete?
Yeah, absolutely. So important for athletes for so many reasons. But, if we just first just briefly look at this protein question, the underlying assumption is that plants don't have protein and that meat is the perfect source of protein. In fact, for so long, even when I was growing up, eggs are promoted and advertised as nature's perfect protein. And so I think that there's been like this kind of delusion in our culture around meat has protein, plants don't have protein. Actually, Popeye got it right with spinach, with his spinach, that he was eating spinach and it made him strong. When we look at the composition of all plants, plants have protein, carbohydrates, and fats at some varied level. And when they study a broad, varied diet of plant-based food, there's always a sufficiency of protein if you're getting enough calories. In an equal comparison of 500 calories of plants to 500 calories of animal products, the plants contain things like cucumbers and peas and tomatoes, and the animal products were dairy and eggs and lamb. In the 500 calorie comparison, the plants had 33 grams of protein and the animals had 34 grams of protein. So equal number of grams of protein. But what's really important in this comparison is that the plants come packaged with like 29,000 units of vitamin A, tons of fiber, 500 milligrams of calcium, a host of minerals, no cholesterol, no saturated fat. The animal products come packaged with saturated fat, cholesterol, very few vitamins and minerals, no fiber, and only 200 milligrams of calcium. And so as we study out this question of protein, it's not really, are you going to be protein deficient on a plant-based diet? We know that if you're getting sufficient calories, you will have enough protein. The question is really, how is your protein going to be packaged in your diet? Is your protein coming from animal products going to be packaged with saturated fat, cholesterol, and deficient in vitamins, minerals? Or is it going to be packaged with this robust group of vitamins, minerals, and fiber that feeds the microbiome? And we'll talk about some of the benefits of those in just a minute in athletes. And so you will be more than sufficient. We don't have a protein deficiency problem in the United States. I've been a doctor a long time, and I've never encountered someone that actually had protein deficiency unless they had, a severe issue. They were abused and not eating. They were an alcoholic. I mean, anybody that has access to food in the United States is not protein deficient today. We actually have a protein excess problem in the United States, and some athletes are consuming 200 to 300 grams of protein in a day. And that excess protein has a negative effect both on their kidneys and their inflammatory levels, and leads to a host of other issues. So just real quick to kind of finalize this, when we're talking about some of the benefits of the package of plant protein, let's just focus on the one aspect, which are phytochemicals or polyphenols. And what the research is showing today that's so powerful that when we're consuming plant-based sources of protein filled with phytochemicals and polyphenols, they have this multiplicity of effects in our body. The polyphenols go in and they turn off this key switch of inflammation in our bodies called NF-kappa beta. And NF-kappa beta is like the master switch in your body for inflammation. When that switch gets flipped, it activates 400 genes in the inflammatory cascade, and that's been related to a host of other diseases like metabolic diseases, like heart disease, hypertension, cancer, autoimmune disease, and diabetes. And so when we eat polyphenols, though, it turns that switch off and it downregulates the whole inflammatory cascade in the body. Polyphenols, along with the fiber, feed the microbiome, and they cause the microbiome to produce butyrate, which is a short-chain fatty acid. Butyrate helps to stabilize blood sugars over the course of 4 to 6 hours, but butyrate also turns off that whole inflammatory cascade. And so in a multiplied effect, the polyphenols and the fiber are reducing inflammation and stabilizing blood sugars and helping the body to be healthy. And all of those things are really important for athletes because it helps them to recover more quickly. And what they're finding with athletes on a plant-based diet is that they recover in half the time that somebody does on a more meat-based diet. So they work out at a higher intensity, and their delayed onset muscle soreness is cut by 50%. So instead of 2 days, maybe it's 1 day. and they can exercise and perform at a higher intensity level more quickly, and their gains and their performances go up more rapidly than those on a meat-based diet.
It's incredible, Dr. Stoll. And if anybody's questioning this and they haven't seen Game Changers yet, they got to go check it out and see it for themselves.
I agree, Robbie.
Now, let's talk about athletes that are living with diabetes. Are there any specific considerations for those that are using oral medications or insulin when they're following a plant-based diet and they become more active?
Yeah, as both of you guys know, because you're athletic and dealing with these same issues, there are some considerations, both with meal timing and understanding your insulin requirements and the duration of the activity and blood sugars over time. And so for people that are going to be exercising over a long period of time, they really need to have an understanding of how their blood sugars typically will follow that long duration of activity to make sure they don't end up hypoglycemic at the end of the day, which can often happen in working with athletes. I see that commonly, that they don't manage the food and insulin dosing or medication dosing. They go out and exercise for 2 to 3 hours and can end up either hypoglycemic or with significant challenges at the end of their exercise bout. So it's really learning. I think you guys do such a nice job of helping people learn how to chart both mealtime, insulin response, and insulin dosing and blood sugars so that people can dial that in and know how to better manage themselves.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad to hear you say that, because a lot of people who come to our program who are insulin dependent in particular, just by eating a plant-based diet, see that their insulin needs, both for basal insulin and bolus insulin, get cut by starting at 10% all the way upwards of 60%. And then if you add exercise into that, their insulin requirements fall even further. And so, it's really important. I can't stress just how important what you just said is, which is that, take into account the fact that you will become more insulin sensitive as a result of those GLUT4 receptors and beyond, and reduce your insulin need accordingly to prevent against going hypoglycemic.
That's right, Cyrus. And that's what you guys do really well. And I think it's really a key point is to, keep accurate charts, especially as you're making the transition. So you can see those trends and see how quickly your body responds and how your GLUT4 receptors are drawing that glucose out of your bloodstream and into your cells. And then make those adjustments, fairly rapidly over time. We find that, even in a week, and this too, you have to reduce insulin fairly quickly over the course of a week as people are getting healthy. And so it's, you need to be on top of that so you don't end up with a crisis.
100%. Now, let's switch gears here and talk a little bit about sleep, because sleep is also another huge and very important component in chronic disease prevention and reversal, and especially in diabetes as well. So, in the United States, I think in particular, a lot of people don't necessarily prioritize how important sleep is, because we live in a culture that encourages and praises productivity. The more productive you are, the more that you can produce, the more hours you stay up, the more reports, the more TPS reports you create, the more you're going to get rewarded, both socially as well as financially. So, what advice could you give to our audience to sort of help them understand a little bit more about the connection between sleep and the risk for the development of chronic diseases?
Yeah, it's really important. And I think, all of us have maybe underestimated the importance of sleep. I've certainly cheated sleep a lot, especially through residency and early parts of my medical career. And there's that mindset like, I'll be fine. I'll get up, have a cup of coffee. It's not a big deal. But it is a big deal. And it's a bigger deal, I think, than we realize. In America, 70 million people sleep 6 hours or less per night. And, it's recommended that people get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep, teens 9.5 hours, and babies 16 hours. So, 70 million people are deficient in sleep. And so you ask, well, what's the impact of that? And it can be really significant. They found in healthy volunteers that people that had sleep disruption for 2 nights, 4.5 hours per night, had a dysregulation of glucose and early signs of insulin resistance after just 2 nights. Now, the good news was that after 2 nights of catch-up sleep, 10 hours or more, that came back into a normalization. But it shows you the effect. They also took a group of healthy volunteers and they put them on like night shift work. They had them shift their schedule, stay up, during the night and then start working during the day. And that group of healthy volunteers saw a reduction in insulin sensitivity of 32% over the course of just a couple of weeks. So and there's more studies that we could talk about, but just in a couple of weeks' time, or even a couple of nights, we see that sleep begins to have an impact on insulin sensitivity and the development of insulin resistance. And I think that happens for several reasons. They found that sleep with too short a sleep or too much sleep actually causes a spike in inflammation, so elevated CRP levels. Inflammation, as you guys have done such a good job of teaching people, has a relationship to insulin resistance, both through the fat cells, the adipocytes, and through the muscle. So as the inflammation starts to spike, people develop insulin resistance. The other interesting thing too about sleep, when we have a sleep disruption and we're not sleeping overnight in those key hours, going to bed at like 10, 11, sleeping till 5 or 6 in the morning, we miss some key spikes. We miss a spike of growth hormone, and growth hormone is reparative and important for regenerating the body. We miss this spike of prolactin. And this prolactin is really important because the research has shown when we don't have prolactin, we have a much greater propensity to have carbohydrate cravings, and this is unhealthy carbohydrate cravings, and appetite stimulation. So, this missing of this key window of sleep pushes people into those areas of craving unhealthy foods that can impact their diabetes. We also have seen with sleep deprivation that it causes a propensity for higher blood pressure and for weight gain, partially because of that lack of that spike of growth hormone. And the last thing is that when we miss that key window of sleep between 10 and 5 or 6, we also miss out on the slow wave sleep. And slow wave sleep, which is stage 3, stage 4 sleep, is really important for repair of the body and regeneration of the body. And when the body misses that slow wave sleep, the studies have shown an increase in inflammation, increase in weight gain, increased susceptibility for type 2 diabetes and hypertension. So sleep is really, really critical. And we can talk in just a minute about some of the other things in our culture that disrupt sleep and then how we can improve our sleep hygiene as well.
Yes, let's definitely talk about that. So I got 2 questions for you. What strategies do you have for someone that's having a difficult time getting to sleep, and also for people who are struggling with staying asleep?
Yeah, great questions, Robbie. And, so a couple of really important things. Number one, it's important to develop a consistent bedtime. And so going to bed at the same time every night, getting up about the same time in the morning, getting up earlier in the morning, going to bed earlier at night, far better off. Those old wise sayings, early to bed, early to rise, were absolutely true. And we have so many things that interrupt our sleep patterns today, from phones to laptops to iPads, and all of those bioluminescent devices, all those screens. That screen actually disrupts the pineal gland secretion of melatonin, the sleep hormone, up to 38% when you view them right before you go to bed. And so that decreases our ability to go to sleep and stay asleep. So it's really important an hour before you go to bed to turn off all devices. And that, it's hard for all of us to put those phones down, not answer that last email. But that's really a critical thing in our culture today, is turn all that off. We shouldn't have televisions in our bedrooms. Those screens really disrupt our sleep. Some people sleep with music or a television on, and that noise is disruptive and we don't ever get into the deep sleep. One other thing, harkening back to the beginning of our conversation, exercise is really important for assisting in sleep. And either exercising in the morning or afternoon helps to regulate those sleep cycles over time. We shouldn't have caffeine after lunch. That's very important. Creating a wonderful sleep environment with, if you want to use some lavender, quiet music, a beautiful bedroom, creating an opportunity for your body to go down and to rest. And then sometimes, some people have trouble sleeping at night because they're thinking about everything they need to do the next day. And I find it's really helpful just to have a pad next to your bed, write down everything that you need to address in the morning, turn it over, and then your brain knows that you've already taken care of it and you can pick it up in the morning, and that really helps to go to sleep. So those are a few of tips I think that will be helpful for people if they're having difficulty sleeping.
That's actually a great idea. It's actually these small little micro habits make such a big difference. And I think it's hard to sometimes see the connection, be like, oh, I'm going to turn this thing off and I should be able to fall asleep right away. But actually internally, the circuitry is, it takes a while for that to actually calm down for you to be able to actually go into a sleepful state.
You're right.
Yeah, I think your point, you're hitting on something really important here. Now, you touched on the fact earlier that, if you become sleep deprived for as little as 2 days, you can see a dramatic increase in the amount of insulin resistance, or it can mimic the effect of insulin resistance. What happens into your cardiovascular health? Are there studies to also show how a lack of sleep or poor sleep hygiene can affect your cardiovascular health?
Yeah, absolutely. Sleep deprivation for so many reasons is a stressor on the body. Our body develops like a sleep debt during the course of the day that needs to get repaid at night. And as we talked about earlier, during that nighttime, there's this huge reparative phase. Growth hormone spikes overnight, cortisol goes down, and the body repairs itself overnight. If we don't have that opportunity to repair, then the body stays in this constant stress mode, and this elevated cortisol remains in the bloodstream. And cortisol damages the endothelium, the little cells that line the blood vessels, which results in this persistent vasoconstriction or narrowed blood vessels, which increases blood pressure. And as we increase the pressure inside those vessels over time, it actually leads to damage. And the body responds to the damage by beginning to lay down those cholesterol plaques that eventually lead to atherosclerosis. Again, back to that idea, when we're not sleeping well and we're stressed, we begin to make other choices that are not healthy. And so these unhealthy choices, sorry about that. So these unhealthy choices, also lead to inflammatory issues and dysbiosis, or the disruption of the microbiome. And, when we're not sleeping, we're less likely to exercise. When we're not sleeping, we get a dysfunction in that microbiome, and we begin to produce inflammatory molecules out of the microbiome, which damage the endothelium and cause inflammation in the arteries as well. It's a multitude of effects with this poor sleep that leads to the growth of these metabolic syndromes. They've also found that poor sleep is related to elevated inflammatory biomarkers like CRP. And so inflammation trends up over time with sleep deprivation. And so for those reasons, the 70 million Americans that are getting 6 hours of sleep or less are at a significant increased risk for not only type 2 diabetes, but hypertension, heart disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and potentially other autoimmune diseases because of that gut dysbiosis.
Dr. Stoll, you have covered a lot of really important information today. We have one final question for you. We basically want to know your elevator pitch. If you were in an elevator and they're thinking about changing to a plant-based diet, they're just not sure, what would you do to encourage somebody to adopt a plant-based diet and really open their mind to this being a possibility for them?
Yeah, this is, I'm going to just give you a tip. My wife has always been so good about this, but she's always telling me two things. One, always focus on the positive aspect. Fear is a short-term motivator, but not a long-term motivator. And she says, always just give them, a little bit, a short bite, but not too much. Because I think the tendency is for all of us that have studied this for so long, we want to dump the dump truck of information on them to say, here, don't you know about epigenetic angiogenesis, the microbiome, all these things. So, I will usually, I tailor my pitch maybe to what the person is most important in that person's life. So for example, if I'm speaking with a teenager, I would say to them, if I saw acne or acne was an issue, I'd say, you know what, I can probably help you resolve your acne in 2 weeks and feel better and have beautiful, clear skin. Would you like to learn how to do that? If somebody has, if they're really concerned about type 2 diabetes or hypertension, and they're concerned about, side effects from medications, I'll tell them, did you know that, these beautiful colors that we see in blueberries and strawberries and mangoes and the beautiful greens can turn off inflammation and make your blood vessels healthy and begin to clean out the plaque in just 2 to 4 weeks. You can see a reduction in blood pressure and maybe begin titrating off medications and feel better every day. Would you like to learn how to do that? And so I'll just, if it's an athlete, I'll tell them, I can help you improve your performance, reduce your delayed onset muscle soreness, prevent injuries, and optimize your performance output in just 2 to 4 weeks by shifting your diet to include, this abundance of fruits and vegetables that will reduce inflammation and give you an edge over the competition. Would you like to learn how to do that? And so in that way, I'm asking them, for permission, and I'm setting a question in their mind that they'll begin thinking about, but I haven't overwhelmed them with information, and I haven't given them too many things to actually focus on the negative. Because if people are afraid you're going to take things away from them oftentimes. So I've learned through the years not to focus on, the ravages that, meat and dairy are having on your microbiome and your endothelium and disrupting your epigenetics. We can go there, but I think for a lot of people, that first introduction with the benefits I found is more well received and ignites interest more than the negative aspect in the presentation.
Yeah, I love the way you talk about that. It's actually it's an easier sell. I mean, not that you're trying to sell anything, but it's an easier entrance into the benefits of a plant-based diet, because it's funny, I've spent years of my life, you spent years of your life in training, working with patients, just learning. And at the end of the day, the answer is eat more fruits and vegetables.
That's right.
It almost seems like absurd that the answer is that simple, but it truly can be. I think that's the beauty of it. And that regardless if you're trying to improve your skin condition and improve your mental health, reverse hypertension, lose weight, and the list goes on, the answer most of the time is you should probably eat more fruits and vegetables.
That's right.
Right. So maybe take a second here and brag about yourself and tell our listeners how they can learn more about you, how can they learn more about the Plantrition Project, and how can they come attend one of your retreats in Florida?
Yeah, thank you, Cyrus. Our passion at the Plantrition Project has been to educate healthcare providers, because we've seen there's a real deficit in healthcare today for healthcare providers that can support people that want to make a lifestyle change and use food as medicine. So we created the International Plant-Based Nutrition Healthcare Conference, which is coming up in 2 weeks in Oakland this year. We'll have about 1,000 attendees from 25 different countries. We have another conference in June, Food Solutions for Human Health in New York City. You can find out about all of those conferences and the resources from the Plantrition Project on plantritionproject.org. We have a new journal, the International Journal of Disease Reversal and Prevention, which is free. We wanted to eliminate all barriers to access to this really important scientific information and make it possible for researchers around the world to submit research and have it published. So that's why we created this open source journal that's free to everyone. Anybody watching today can sign up for free, ijdrp.org. We have a consumer-facing periodical that is linked to the journal that kind of rewrites the journal publications in language that we all understand better. It's called the Disease Reversal Digest. And that's a very small subscription, but the subscription costs actually go to support the journal. And that's why we created that business model, so that we could keep the journal free of advertising and marketing. And that's a wonderful periodical that's coming out in 2 weeks. Both the journal and the digest, the new editions will be out in 2 weeks. So you can find those resources there. For more than 10 years, we've been doing health immersions down in Naples, Florida, for people that are struggling with disease. And we take an amazing week and we feed people delicious whole food plant-based meals all week. We talk about the science behind being healthy. We have some light exercise. We have a lot of fun, including dinner cruise on the Gulf and a beach party. And that's an amazing week called Dr. Stoll's Total Health Immersion. And that's on my website, drscottstoll.com. And the last thing that is really fun is that we just started this partnership with the Rodale Institute, because one of my passions is this concept of regenerative agriculture, that the food that we're purchasing and we put on our plate has an impact on the resources that we're stewarding for our children, including the topsoil and the water and the land and even the air. And so when we learn to make the right choices about the food that we purchase at the supermarket and put in our bodies, we are stewarding and helping regenerate healthy topsoil, clean water, clean air, and a sustainable, renewable system for the next generation. So we have a relationship with the Rodale Institute. We do a wonderful little quarterly Facebook Live that you can find on the Plantrition Project from the farm, where we talk about a lot about regenerative agriculture and farming and how to cook food and make it delicious. And we have a PBS program coming out this fall. And I have a new book coming out this fall called Your Next Bite, which kind of puts all of these things together. So you can look for all those things, drscottstoll.com and the plantritionproject.org.
Scott, how do you have any free time in your day? I mean, you're running like 12 businesses and you're writing books and you're giving lectures and you're running retreats. This is unbelievable how much work you're able to do.
Yeah, it's busy. It is busy, but
I think it's all the plants that are giving him energy.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I hope you're sleeping
all that
properly.
Stuff behind you there, Robbie.
That's great.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today, Dr. Stoll. You have so much valuable information, plus your ability to calmly and eloquently describe the benefits of sleep, the benefits of exercise, and the benefits of eating a nutrient-dense plant-based diet are exceptional. So, thank you for helping to educate doctors and getting this information more accessible by the medical community. It's really a gargantuan effort, and without your help, the medical world would be at a lack of solid evidence-based information. So, thank you for taking the time to do that. Thank you for being here with us today, and I truly hope that we get to continue to work together into the future.
We will very much. I want to thank you, Cyrus and Robbie, and your entire team. You guys do such an incredible job of educating people, and I think you're the premier program. And I just really applaud all of your efforts, and it's been an honor being with you as always, and look forward to continuing to work together. So thank you to all of you and all of you watching. I really appreciate all of you. So thanks.